Hi guys, welcome back to True Crime with Jen. Today I'll be covering the case of 15-year-old Luke Smith. This is a local story for me. What happened to Luke happened a little over 3 years ago, so it still feels honestly like it happened yesterday. I promise to anybody who may have known Luke, his family, his friends, classmates, that a lot of consideration went into making this video, and I will be handling it as sensitively as possible. Luke Smith grew up in Aptos, California with his older sister Savannah and his mother and father. Luke was the kind of kid that walked to the beat of his own drum. He wore whatever he wanted, and I truly mean that in every sense of the word. It would not be strange at all to see Luke in some 80s style dolphin shorts, a feather boa,
looking good, fella,
his signature Native American brown leather jacket adorned with lots of fringe, and more than likely a pair of swim goggles to complete the look. Luke did whatever he wanted, and he was liked by everyone, and everyone knew who Luke was. So we live here in an ocean community, and a lot of the kids take up surfing at a young age. Luke was one of them. He was really passionate about surfing. He was also in junior guards. He was a junior guards lifeguard. He wrote his own music. He did freestyle rap, and his sister called him a lyrical genius. He was writing every day on whatever he could get his hands on. He was into baseball, basketball, water polo, and he had traveled the world by the time he was in high school due to his mom being a flight attendant. This is a quote from one of his friends. He says, "One thing I really admired about Luke was how he always had a plan for what we were going to do, and there was never a dull moment with him. Luke was a leader, never a follower." So I want to share a Luke encounter that I had. I'm a substitute teacher in the area, and I sub, kinder to senior year, and I was subbing at his school one day, and which was my daughter's school also. She's a year older than him, and I was doing freshman health, which always tends to be, these classes are always wild. I don't know why, they just are. It was passing period, and the kids were starting to filter into the classroom, and this tall, definitely over 6 foot, skinny kid, Luke Smith, walks in, and I knew about Luke. I knew he was this wild and crazy kid, and I thought, oh God, here comes this kid. I need to be prepared for him, like being probably the class clown during this class, so I'm kind of preparing myself for it. And the first thing he does is he walks into the classroom, and he just, without taking his backpack off, just lays across 3 of the desks in a row. They're like in a row, and he just lays down. And I'm like, oh, here we go. And I'm like, I'm not going to say anything. I'm going to act like I don't even notice, but it's starting to get close to the time when the bell's going to ring. And I finally have to say to him, you're going to have to sit in your seat, hello, like, I'm aware of you. Is this how we're going to start off our class? Like, in my mind, I'm thinking this is going to be happening the whole class. Am I going to have to call the office? How is he going to be during class? And so I kind of said again, you're going to need to like get in your seat, so people can get into their seats. And he just continued to absolutely ignore me. And all of a sudden the bell rings, and he pops up and walks out of the class. He wasn't even in my class. So that is just an example of what Luke Smith was like. I'm going to start this video from that day of the perspective of what we heard and how we heard the news, and then I'll get into the breakdown from the police and the timeline. It was Saturday, November 19th, 2016, and we were at a wedding. My daughter was in a wedding. It was a family wedding, her father's side of the family. And by the time we got to the reception, almost literally when we walked in, rumors had started that Luke Smith had died last night. And none of us had any information. There were other classmates at the wedding, so they asked if we knew Luke. We did, but we didn't have any information. We assumed, my gosh, it must have been a car accident, but we knew for sure that Luke had died. And just that information alone was so hard to take when we're at this happy event. And there was only a few of us at the wedding who knew Luke and knew what had happened, that he had passed away. So during the reception, we were trying to get more information. My daughter was, trying to pose for pictures and smile and going into the bathroom and just, wiping away tears. So although we thought maybe it was a car accident or even a drug overdose, because I'm not going to sugarcoat this, Luke had been experimenting with drugs, so our minds wondered if something had happened with him taking drugs. But what we later discovered was what happened to Luke was much, much worse. So I'm going to read the timeline from the Santa Cruz District Attorney's Office. On Friday, November 18th, so the night before, sometime between 9:30 and 11, Luke and a friend had purchased LSD from a dealer in Santa Cruz, and they had ingested that LSD sometime between 9:30 and 11:30. Several hours after they had ingested the LSD, and some have claimed that it was a bad batch, mainly due to the way Luke acted after he had taken this. So now we're into Saturday, early morning, November 19th, about 2:30 a.m. And Luke returned to the house in Corralitos where he lived part-time with his father and uncle. About 15 minutes after he got home, he got into a verbal altercation with his father. And gripping a 4-inch pocket knife, Luke attacked his father and uncle and stabbed both of them somewhere in the torso. From what I recall, that's where they were stabbed. Luke then fled from the house. So I will say that Luke had no prior history of violence in any way. Luke was a very easygoing, nice kid. So everybody believes that it was the drugs that evoked this kind of reaction with Luke. So both his father and his uncle called 911 from separate lines in the house to report what had just happened. And sheriff's deputies, CAL FIRE, and paramedics were dispatched to the home. It was reported by the first responders that Luke had attacked the fire truck. It's not clear at all in what manner he attacked it, but it was enough for them to report that he was attacking the truck. So then Luke ran away from that scene and was located about 10 minutes later down the street. This is a rural area. This was like country roads, no cars around, farm animals, farmland, houses are far apart, very quiet area. So the police find Luke and they begin to negotiate with him, and they really want him to put the knife down.
Less lethal for Watsonville 240306.
Lucas, it's the sheriff's office. We want to try and help you. We just need you to put the knife down first. Lucas, can you put the knife down for me, please?
But Luke was not letting it go. He wasn't holding it up in a attacking manner or anything like that. He was just standing there. He was just holding it. The negotiations, the verbal negotiations with Luke turn into using less than lethal methods to detain him. They started with shooting him with the 40mm sponge bullets. They shot 3 of them at Luke and they had no effect on him. And all 3 hit him. And they're basically supposed to cause temporary incapacitation.
Hey Lucas, we can still talk, right? We want to try and get you some help. We know you're under the influence, okay? LSD is a tough thing because it's hard to differentiate between reality and what's not, right? So let's take this nice and slow, okay? Is there anything we can do? Anything we can do to get you to put the knife down?
I'm sorry, what was the question?
Lucas, we need you to stop. Don't get any closer. Lucas, we need you to stop. Taser. Taser.
Less lethal, less lethal. Drop the knife, Lucas.
Drop the knife.
Drop the knife. Drop the knife. Less lethal, less lethal. Drop the knife, Lucas. Drop the knife. Less lethal, less lethal. Drop the knife. Drop the knife.
A taser was then shot at Luke with no effect.
Okay, who's got less lethal right now? Taser. You got radio, Sarge? I got AR long gun.
I have less lethal.
I have pistol.
Okay.
40mm round of less lethal.
Okay, you got 1 round left?
I got 3.
All right, Sarge, you want to wait till we put the call in? Lucas, we need you to come out with your hands up.
As you can see, the headlights from their cars are really what's making it possible to see Luke, so it's a little hard to see everything really clearly, but you can see that Luke is not being violent in any way. They had continued to tell Luke to put the knife down. He looked very confused to me. I'm sure the influence of the drugs was affecting reality completely at this point, so maybe he didn't even understand that he had a knife in his hand. But he wasn't putting it down. So they move in closer, and they were probably about 15 feet from Luke. So a police dog was deployed on Luke to try to get him down so they could get a hold of him. Luke reacted to the dog biting his arm, and so he flailed up to get the dog away from him because the dog was biting him. And in that motion, he had a knife in his hand, his arms went up, and I guess looked like he was attacking the dog. It was at that moment that Deputy Chris Vigil fired a single round from his AR-15 rifle that shot Luke directly in the chest.
Sheriff's office. It's a police. We can't see his hands. They'll move up. Lucas? Yeah. Okay, we're ready to deploy the canine. I got lethal coverage. Lucas? Okay.
Call you Luna. You got taser?
He grabbed his chest. He looked at his hand really fast, like he just did not get what had just happened to him, and he was down. At that moment, the police continued their less than lethal methods. As he was laying lifeless on the ground, they shot him 2 more times with the 40mm sponge bullets. They tased him 1 more time, and they deployed the dog on him 1 more time. The dog was yanking his lifeless body, and Luke wasn't reacting at all. Officials approached Luke, and they turned him over onto his face and handcuffed him while he was dying. I heard officers in the video telling him to stay with them, to keep breathing, stay with us, Luke, but it's an AR-15. These bullets are meant to go into a body, tumble around to do as much damage through the flesh, and leave the body making a big hole as it exits. They're very well aware of what these guns are capable of doing. Luke was declared dead at the scene. At 4:30 a.m., the district attorney's office was requested to lead an independent investigation into the officer-involved shooting. A few days later, the Santa Cruz County Sheriff's Department released a videotape of the shooting scene to the media, which went on YouTube and Facebook. Luke's family, friends, and people like me saw it and watched in horror. This was a boy that needed help. He was up against a firing squad, and his mind was unclear. If they had only known how many would have run to help Luke in that moment, but instead they acted quickly in a lethal manner that truly required much more mental health assistance. Our town, Aptos, California, was subsequently outraged by this footage that we saw. It felt absolutely avoidable and unnecessary. The authorities maintain that their actions were in accordance with proper training procedures and that no charges would be filed against the deputy who shot and killed Luke.
Aaron, Dan, we now know the relationship between Luke Smith and the two men he stabbed. We also now know the name of the deputy who fired that fatal shot. It was all caught on body cam video of violent outbursts, according to the sheriff, fueled by LSD. The shot that killed the 15-year-old Luke Smith was a bullet to the chest, fired by 9-year veteran Chris Vigil, who's now been placed on department leave.
He did not do anything wrong. It's our common practice and our policy that we place people on administrative leave immediately following a shooting.
I mean, I understand that some people are going to watch this and take the side of law enforcement. I know he had a weapon that he wouldn't release, and he'd already been violent with his dad and his uncle. And I understand law enforcement don't want to risk their lives for somebody who's already shown signs of aggression and they were dangerous. That makes sense. What I don't understand is their urgency at 3 a.m. This entire negotiation took 12 minutes from the time that they met up with Luke on the road until the time that they shot him. He wasn't running from them. He was basically standing in one spot. He had moved a little bit. They told him to stop moving towards them. He stopped. And you can see in the video when they finally got up to him, he was crouched down. He wasn't moving. And then he stood up as they approached him. Because maybe he thought he needed to be handcuffed. Who knows? Who knows what was going on in his mind at that moment? And you can clearly see that he's holding his hands in a surrendering motion. He's got his hands out and open, although I know he has a knife in his one hand. It's really hard to see it, but they say that he did. So I understand that that's still an issue, that he's holding the knife. But they also knew that he was under the influence of LSD. And I just don't understand why they couldn't have used different measures than going for an AR-15. Like, why wasn't pepper spray used? I don't understand that. Exactly 1 week after Luke died, over 500 people came to share their love and memories at Luke's life celebration. It was also Luke's 16th birthday. And I don't know how we did it, I can still barely talk about it, but we all sang happy birthday to Luke. His sister, who at the time was a senior, did a tremendous job of running the memorial service. She's a pretty amazing individual herself. I do want to note that his father and uncle were both at the memorial service and they were walking around fine. You wouldn't have known that they had been stabbed a week before. The drug dealers in Santa Cruz that sold the LSD to the two boys were arrested shortly after all of this happened. They were able to arrest 3 out of the 4. One of them, they found he was in a coma. When they found him, they believe it was drug-induced and that he was suffering from an overdose. So as a result of what happened to Luke, many people got together, parents, his family, the community, and they came up with something called Luke's Law. What they would like to see done in the future in Luke's name. Luke's Law says, we are seeking a policy that values nonviolent de-escalation of conflicts over speedy and violent resolutions. If a person of interest does not bear a firearm and is or is not under the influence and is or is not mentally ill, they would like to see law enforcement do this. First step, have a mental health professional on the scene. This happened in the middle of the night, all the time in the world to handle this situation with Luke. Number 2, have an ambulance ready and available. Number 3, have their body cameras on at all times. Number 4, contact a parent or spouse or someone that knows the individual to help control the situation. And then they would like to see lethal force go in the following order. First, just an officer's presence. Number 2, verbal commands and cooperative control. Number 3, using martial arts, using more hand-to-hand combat training. Number 4, pepper spray or mace. They could have easily sprayed him with pepper spray and he would have dropped the knife in a second. They then say if that doesn't work, go to a baton. And if that doesn't work, then go to the taser. And if the taser doesn't work, then the canine. And if the canine doesn't work, then firearms. So there is a petition on Luke's website, and they also have a hashtag that says Luke's Law Matters. I looked all over on the website to see what might be happening with this law and the petition. The petition is still there. You can still go there, add your name, and sign it. I am not sure where they are in the process of getting this law to move forward. It didn't look to me like there had been much activity on the website since 2017. So maybe if you guys see this video and go to the website and add your name and sign a petition, it might spur some movement in this law. Thank you for watching this video about Luke Smith. This is a rough one for me. Again, I didn't know Luke, but because he's from this area and I know so many of his friends, it still affects me, and I'm a mom. No one should have to lose their life in this way. I leave you with some pictures from a gathering that took place with lots of friends of Luke who just needed to have some time together, remembering him and celebrating his life.
Treadmill, you staying in place. I'm trying to finish the race, trying to get ahead, still both to eventually end up dead. But it's the story of the birth to the death that gets read. So you stay doing you, I'll be doing me instead.